What you're looking at there is obviously a Blue Lives Matter flag. No big deal. I'm sure you've seen them before. Maybe you fly one yourself. Well, it is a big deal because somebody, his name is James Moore, he's a USC professor, he's hanging it outside of his office. College campuses are not exactly thought of as Blue Lives Matter havens these days. So I wanted to bring on James onto the show, one, to thank him for showing some guts, and two, ask him why. James, I applaud you. I think it's awesome to swim against the tide. Why do this? Why take a bunch of heat? I'm sure it hasn't been lovely for you on a college campus.
There's been any number of reasons. I'm worried. I don't like to see the rise in crime that is around us right now. The numbers are pretty stark. So I don't like the Black Lives narrative that Black lives are in danger from the police. It's not statistically sound. It couldn't be further from the truth. And I'm trying to communicate to my students that, in fact, they're not getting the whole story. So it's a jumping off point for discussion with my students.
You mentioned the narrative. It's funny because I actually opened my show talking about that exact thing, that narrative that everyone was screaming about last year in the wake of that video, which was admittedly awful from Minneapolis. Everyone just decided, it seemed all at once, that the cops were hunting down black men in America. And as you pointed out, there's no statistical evidence for that whatsoever. And yet a huge portion of this society, probably a gigantic portion of your campus, just bought into it. Why were they so ready to buy into it? It was like it was spoon-fed for them.
Well, part of it is the messaging they get from the leadership of the institutions. So the virtue signaling in 2020 went into high gear with respect to our leadership, whether it was the president's office or the provosts or the deans of schools. They were just falling all over each other, trying to reinforce this message and the steps that the institution would take to try to protect black students and black lives. The mainstream media reinforced the message. We do try to promote critical thinking here at the University of Southern California, and we still occasionally succeed. Though in that case, critical thinking skills of the organization more or less failed. And it's largely because the students receive, I think, such consistent messaging that they realize it's dangerous to step back. It would be extremely inconvenient to step back and try to take a stand or voice questions about whether or not that point of view is really valid. So I think a lot of it was just fear. Right.
So it's just a matter of doing what's easy. What kind of blowback have you gotten from students or USC itself?
Well, it has mounted pretty slowly. I mean, the flag's been up for the entire academic semester. And it wasn't until about a month ago that I got some feedback from the campus media, from the campus newspaper, that there were students who were unhappy about it. I had not heard from those students. The only students I had heard from were people who had stopped by the office, people I didn't know, who noticed it on the office door and knocked on the door and said, "Thank you for doing that." But I hadn't heard any opposition. So the opposition was identified in the campus newspaper, and then I indicated I would talk to any student that wanted about this. In fact, that was the goal. That was one of the objectives. And then I got a call from the dean's office in my school, asking rather politely if I might not take that down. They were a little bit vague about why, what the motive was for that call. It turned out that the impetus had come from the central administration. And this is typical. If the central administration doesn't like something a faculty member does, they filter action through the leadership of the school the faculty member is in. I didn't find out until later that the opposition had come not from where I thought it had probably come from the provost's office, but rather from our HR department, which is unusual. Typically, HR departments don't get involved in the academic statements of faculty. So I did politely decline to take the flag down, and we've kept it civil. They felt they had to ask, or perhaps they wanted to ask. I really didn't quiz them on that point, and they did. And I told them I would think about it. And I was just trying to be thoughtful and polite, and I sent them back an email message that explained why the flag was there and why I didn't want to take it down, and why, in fact, I didn't plan on taking it down.
Hey, thanks so much for watching the first on YouTube. If you liked what you saw, go ahead and like and subscribe. You heard me. Like it, subscribe. You'll get a lot more of it and a lot more of me.